Right Away with Craig Murray. For more information, visit cmurray.com. Writing engaging characters. Tim walked down the street. Tim went into the store. Tim got a loaf of bread, some eggs, some milk, some tea biscuits, and some tea. Tim went home. Tim had a sandwich with fried egg, some tea with milk, some biscuits. Tim looked at the wall. Oh my God, writing engaging characters is so hard. I just don't get it. I read different books about how to write engaging characters, and there's so many rules. Show me the hundreds of things you have to do. It's impossible to keep track of. Whatever will I do? It's impossible. Yeah, no. Engaging with a character is the same thing as engaging with another person. Imagine you're with Tim. The entire time he says nothing. You have no idea what he's thinking. You stare at him, he stares at you, you walk down the street. At some point after a few minutes you think, there must be something else I could be doing with my spare time, like, I don't know, watching grass or staring at a wall. It'd probably be more interesting than hanging out with Tim. And no offense to anyone named Tim. You find in a lot of books, or movies for that matter, there is a foil for the main character. By that I mean there is some person or thing the main character is talking to. Their speech lets us see who they really are, or at least who they're pretending to be. And in movies, there's rarely any thought, and I'm not just talking about the writing. You don't have characters just sitting blankly, staring at a wall. You don't have them spending huge amounts of time just being silent. It's not interesting to us. It's not engaging. In books, we have the fantastic ability to include thoughts, and it doesn't leave a character just sitting, staring blankly at a wall. We have an opportunity to see how the person really thinks, who they are inside their head. Now, thoughts generally need to be done rather judiciously and intelligently. The truth is, for most writers anyway, we spend a lot of time inside our heads. Terrifying concept, I know. We're creating worlds, we're creating people, we have love stories and fistfights, arguments, and everything in between all rolling around colliding with each other. If you think you'd take a video of the average writer at work, you'd see the most boring film ever. There'll be huge amounts of time with the author staring into space, maybe pacing, maybe lying on the couch, maybe sitting outside fixating on a tree without ever seeing the tree. You can almost imagine the scene being filmed. The author's sitting out back in his Adirondack chair. He isn't moving, he's barely breathing. We're mostly sure he's still alive. The camera moves about and the world is 100% silent. There are no screaming kids in the distance, no cars racing past, no neighbors or buses or anything else. It's a completely silent movie. Then the camera zooms in right to the side of his head and right through it. Cue the explosions. Now all of a sudden there are 800 people talking and arguing, machine guns and trains and buses and cars, people being born, growing old, dying, all at the same time. The inside is a mess, a noisy and chaotic mess. That's pretty normal for a lot of writers when they're coming up with stories. The camera zooms back out and our statue moves. He sits down in front of the keyboard, typing like a lunatic, still not saying anything, still not reacting to any of the noises around him. Even the noise in his head is quieted down to the stream of words that run down from his brain, through his neck, through both arms, into his fingers, and into the keyboard. It may be a pretty accurate movie, but it's also going to be a pretty boring one to watch. So for a lot of the writers listening to this, you may have a smile or a chuckle. You know that writer. You get along with that writer. You can completely understand and sympathize and engage with that character because they're you. The dialogue and thought that you put into your stories is what engages a reader. How do you want your character to come across? Lovable, hateful, average, very focused? Whatever their personality is supposed to be, you can release it and expose it through their thoughts and dialogue. If you give them a foil, a partner or a friend or a puppy that they're talking to, we get to see who they are and what they're thinking. So let's go back to Tim. We want to make him kind of lovable, maybe a little bit goofy. He's a funny character that people are going to relate to because he's a bit of a scatterbrained, goofy guy. No, come on, really? Tim sat down in the empty tea jar and looked around the kitchen. Do I have any anywhere else? He thought to himself as he opened up the pantry and stared, hoping to find the box of tea he knew wasn't there. He stared at the kettle forlornly. Wisps of steam rose in the early morning, seeming to tease him at their lack of use. Okay, Let's get tea, he said to his little dog that lay in the bed in his one-room studio apartment. Fred the dog was not interested in going outside. Come on, up, let's go, he called to the dog, who barely opened his eyes at the command. Oh, come on. Where's your leash? The dog started to close its eyes again, hoping he'd be left alone. Tim scooped him up, found the leash hanging on the coat hook by the door, and stepped outside. Walking halfway down the hallway, he suddenly stopped. Wait, what else do I need? Cursing under his breath, he walked back along to his apartment, fumbled with his keys, lurched inside. Quickly opening up the cupboards and the fridge, he made a quick tally in his head. Milk, bread, eggs, he said out loud, retracing his steps and locking the apartment. He was halfway down the hall when he smiled to himself and said, Oh yeah, tea. Now we see his personality. We have an idea of who he is, the sort of character he is. We can relate to him. We've all forgotten stuff. We've all ran out of things. Tim's one of us. One of us is what's engaging to the reader. Of course, now, when Tim leaves and walks to the store, he might be engaging with some of the people he passes. Oh, hey, good morning, Mrs. Jablonski. How are you today? Oh, I'm okay, Tim, all things considered, she said with a smile. When he gets to the store, he is well known. He engages with the shopkeeper and maybe they chat for a bit. Whatever your story needs. He's engaging with the world. He's engaging with the reader. Now let's change Tim 180 degrees. No longer our friendly, goofy guy. Let's paint him someone completely different. The single-room apartment was Spartan to the point where at first glance you might think nobody lives there. In one corner was a folding aluminum frame military cot with a sleeping bag on it. The closet doors were open and inside was a black suit, basic and plain, still in its dry cleaning bag. A white shirt with its regimental tie draped around the neck, 3 pairs of cargo pants, 4 long-sleeve coarse shirts. Sitting on the floor underneath a polishing cloth was a perfectly polished pair of black Oxfords, and beside them, a pair of hiking boots. The only other furniture was 2 plain black stools. It's been 2 years since Sergeant Tim Hollister's last deployment, but old habits die hard. Tim sat in one of the stools, leaning slightly forward, reading a magazine. The other stool had a short stack of dossiers and books piled upon it. A soft but firm knock on the door interrupted his reading. Hollister, it's Wilson. Open up. Moving quickly to the door, unlocking it, and opening it for the only person he truly considered a friend. At first glance, the two could have been mistaken for brothers. Such was the similarity in appearance. Broad-shouldered, muscular, military short haircut, and hard faces that hard times brought. They hugged briefly and clapped each other in the back. Wasn't expecting you, said Tim. All the more reason to stop by, replied Sergeant Philip Wilson, a man he'd known for 10 years and most of it in combat. Hungry? Tim asked. Always bloody hungry. Right, well, I've got nothing here, so come on down to the shops and we'll get what we need, said Tim. Walking briskly down the street, they passed the old woman that lived in the ground floor apartment. She smiled and nodded. They smiled and nodded curtly. Mrs. Jablonski didn't know much about the man renting the apartment above her. She did know she felt safer knowing he was there. So this is brief. It's very basic. But we now have a completely different character that we know is going to be living a completely different life from the other Tim. This guy is ex-military, very disciplined, very squared away. I see he cares about his friend and he's generous. His very first thought is to feed him. That gives us a clue to his personality. He doesn't engage with Mrs. Jablonski the same way. He does, however, exude a reliability and strength and trustworthiness that she's picked up on and appreciates. This Tim may be a hard man, but he seems to be a good man. Any version you like, any variation on him, to develop engagement is to bring out who the person is and let the reader be right there with them. So, let's go another 180 degrees away from this Tim. I'm not going to go into any detail or storyline. With the first two, I want you to like them, to be interested in what's going to happen to them, to want to stick along for the ride, and that's what we want our readers to do. Feel something, feel some sort of kinship so they stick with our story. So this time, let's imagine the same apartment. Empty junk food bags, empty cans of soda, piles of garbage cover every inch of the floor. A single mattress, filthy and stained, is in one corner with an even filthier blanket on top of it. The walls are covered with pictures printed from the internet of women and cartoon girls, all in morally questionable poses. You can smell the place. You want to leave and go put on a biohazard suit before returning. A character is hunched over a computer keyboard watching some adult video. He's naked except for a heavily stained and ragged pair of underwear. His hair is long, unkempt, and so greasy it looks like it's not been washed in years. Perspiration rolls down his skin and over countless boils and pimples, all the result of a horrific diet and a lack of personal cleanliness. Okay, we don't want to know this guy. We don't want to associate with him. We sure don't want to engage with him. Period. The only thing we're pretty sure about, or at least guessing about, is that someone this horrible is probably going to do something equally horrible. We don't really imagine this character who's filthy inside and out is about to get up and go feed a school full of orphans before volunteering at the local animal shelter. We're not getting that vibe. So if you write a character like this, your reader's not going to like them. They're going to wait for them to do something horrific. You've managed to creep out your reader, and maybe not in a good way, unless you're planning on writing some sort of slasher story. One of the reasons that I kept this pretty basic, unlike the other two, is we know his thoughts are not going to be something we want to hear. And if he's talking to himself, it's not going to be anything we want to hear either. I don't want to write about this guy. I sure don't want to read about him. So it's easy to make engaging characters. Just remember to make them engage. Engage with their thoughts. Engage with them speaking to themselves. Engage with them engaging with other people. We'll see their personality. We'll see things that we like and can associate with. We'll see someone we want to follow on their journey. And that's what you need to do to write engaging characters.